MacNair, PhD in psychology, and so I am going to be giving you all some insights that will have a lot to do with what we can get done, and also some connections of issues that we don't cover an awful lot but should. You can't get me to talk without talking about perpetration-induced traumatic stress. This is the reason I went to get the PhD, and the reason for that was that I was sitting and contemplating the question, okay, well, if abortion is killing, then people should be reacting to it the way people react to killing. And I knew what that was. That's battle fatigue, which nowadays they call post-traumatic stress disorder. And I never did put my mic on. I'm so sorry. Nobody noticed.
No.
Well, other people have to learn how to project. I had to learn how not to. Okay. So I hope that doesn't mess up on the video, but so I'm sitting there and I'm thinking, okay, battle fatigue. So let's see if that applies to abortion staff. And then I looked into it and found that, bless my little pacifist heart, I was just assuming that when you go into battle and are traumatized by it, well, I mean, what you're doing in battle is killing people, so that's what's traumatizing you. This is not what the scholars were thinking. This is not what the therapists had in mind. You know, your buddy was shot, so you were traumatized. You were being shot at, that was traumatizing. But the idea that you're shooting somebody, I mean, you know, no, all this trauma had to be what the enemy did to you, not what your commander was telling you to do to others. So I did look into it, and I did find loads of evidence that the post-trauma symptoms are common in the soldiers and the combat veterans, and I'm getting a lot of work done in the scholarship on that. There's also evidence of post-trauma symptoms in abortion staff. I did find plenty of that. If you're interested in the scholarship on it, the book is Post-Traumatic Stress Disorder, Perpetration-Induced Traumatic Stress, and it's over there. That's the scholarly tome. If you're interested in more of an easy read kind of thing that goes just on abortion with side trips to the other issues, then you want Achieving Peace in the Abortion War. Now, this is the Cliff Notes version of the definition of PTSD. You have to have an actual trauma because, you know, if it's not something most people would regard as traumatic or it's a fantasy in your head, then your problem is something different. Various ways of re-experiencing the trauma, numbing, increased arousal, and it's the big point is that it's sticking. If you say, well, when was this trauma, and the answer is 2 weeks ago, well, time may take care of it.
Fresh.
The point is that time has not taken care of it. Now I did, I'll go through this quickly, but the government did pull together a database on the Vietnam veterans, and I was able to get a hold of it and do a secondary analysis, and we will see that those who answered yes on killing had a considerably higher score on PTSD than those that answered no. You don't need to worry about what the numbers actually mean. The ones at the bottom are for people who know stats. I can tell you that bottom number means the difference is huge.
Which bottom? I'm sorry.
The Cohen's D.
Oh.
Cohen's D equals 0.97. 0.8 is a large size of the difference. And for those exposed to the killing of civilians or prisoners, they had a difference between directly involved and only saw. And that helps because, of course, if somebody said no on killing, they may have been doing paperwork in Saigon, and of course they had no trauma, so why would we, you know. But in this case, they were exposed to a trauma. And the difference between directly involved and only saw is quite large. Well, and the next question is, well, I mean, you know that the more intense the battle, the greater the trauma, duh. And maybe it's nothing more than a marker for that you were in the heavier battle. And then there will be people who, of course, didn't kill in battle. They either didn't have cause to, or they were medics and, you know, running around doing things other than shooting. And you will see that for light, moderate, heavy, the scores do in fact go up the heavier the combat gets, which makes sense. Note that the score for not killing in heavy combat is lower than the score for killing in light combat. See, you can just see the numbers. The kill is higher when you take battle intensity into account. Now, there's also a very strange phenomenon called addiction to trauma. And in this case, I call it the thrill of the kill. Addiction to trauma can also apply to people who get beat up and then go get themselves in situations to get beat up again. But I'm applying it to this, and there are actually opioids in the brain. And this is a stress response. And it's a very useful, adaptive stress response if what's happening is that you're running away from a tiger. You need to not feel pain. You need to be very focused. You need to have that protection. It becomes maladaptive in other situations, but the biology is set up for it. Opioids, I mean, these are natural opioids, but really if you were to take them and make them artificial and put them in a bottle, what you'd have is cocaine. And so you get withdrawal symptoms, meaning that you crave another hit. So the irony of it is that a state of euphoria can actually be associated with trauma. And the people who have this reaction, it's only a portion of people that do, can end up with a rip-roaring case of PTSD. So this is, you know, the trauma wasn't traumatizing to them at the time, they had euphoria. Because basically they had a naturally induced drug condition in their brain. And this may be where the term bloodthirsty comes from. Going high class. PTSD is defined as a disorder, and therefore it has to be when it's dysfunctional. But we find over and over again that there are people who have the opposite reaction. They are super functional. Remember, for instance, Senator Robert Kerry, not John, but Robert Kerry, when he had this big thing about the this scandal about the people he had shot, the village full of people in Vietnam. And he was trying to explain that he did have post-trauma symptoms, and there were all kinds of people poo-pooing this, like, you know, that doesn't excuse you, this was immoral. Well, I mean, the man was a U.S. senator. So obviously he wasn't, you know, a homeless vet under a bridge. So what you have is workaholism, which is being used in a similar manner as alcoholism. It's used to push away the trauma in the mind, and in fact, they have found World War II vets who showed no sign of trauma whatsoever until they retired. And then, boom, it hit.
They had time to be.
Well, the workaholism was no longer pushing it away. And it is more adaptive, obviously, than alcoholism, but it is self-medication. And this helps to account for why we have people who are suffering from what in theory is a disorder in government, corporations, and abortion clinics. Now, this, there was a lot of evidence to apply this to abortion. I mean, this 1974 study, which is before the term post-traumatic stress disorder was in the lexicon, obsessional thinking about abortion, depression, fatigue, anger, lowered self-esteem, and identity complex were prominent. The symptom complex was considered a transient reactive disorder similar to combat fatigue. So this is, as you see, professional staff reaction to abortion work. Marianne Such-Bayer here has identified combat fatigue as being something that the abortion staff is suffering. And this one, done by Catherine Rowe, the last name being totally coincidental. Both of these authors were very definitely of pro-choice philosophy, saying that this was a problem we needed to figure out how to solve so that women could get the services they needed. So this was not, you know, the right-wing fanatics that were just trying to find something to, some mud to throw. This was 1989. Ambivalent periods were characterized by a variety of otherwise uncharacteristic feelings and behavior, including withdrawal from colleagues, resistance to going to work, lack of energy, impatience with clients, and an overall sense of uneasiness. Nightmares, images that could not be shaken, and preoccupation were commonly reported. There's way, way more about this in Achieving Peace in the Abortion War. Sally Teasdale's article, We Do Abortions Here, in Harper's Magazine, is just full of this, but particularly the dreams. The dreams are a good marker on post-traumatic stress disorder because that's one way to give you the content of what it is that traumatized you. Otherwise, if you're just feeling all other kinds of things, it can be all kinds of things that traumatize you, but the dreams have content. And she says, I have fetus dreams. We all do here. Dreams of abortions, one after the other, of buckets of blood splashed on the walls. I'm going to skip this because I've been asked not to do gory stuff. And then the intrusive imagery and reenactment. The top one is a woman who's an abortion doctor. This is uncommon. Abortion doctors are way disproportionately male. But both of the women who have written books on it, on their own experiences that I have found, were women who have had abortions and got into the abortion business after that, which is telling. Time and again, I flash back to my own abortion. I carried those memories into every meeting with a patient. And every single day I worked, and with each patient I treated, I remembered that abortion. Okay, so that covers the depressing part. Well, not depressing isn't the word. It's a positive thing to think that the human mind really is not suited to kill. It is making it clear that, you know, all these people who said, oh well, it's in our nature and all that, that's nonsense. The human mind is not suited to killing. It tends to make us sick. Okay, so now I'm moving on to a positive theme, which is the psychological view of consistency. And the psychological view is that the mind has a drive for it. And this has been known since the 1950s with the theory of cognitive dissonance. The theory being that people want their actions, beliefs, and emotions to match, and a mismatch is stressful. And because it's stressful, they will deal with it by changing whatever they can to fix it to be discordant, to fix it to be consistent. Now, obviously, there are people who are not consistent and don't care and about being consistent, and the term for that is Machiavellianism. I'm not making it up. That's the psychological term. There's a Machiavellian scale and the whole bit. And in fact, the putting people peacefully to death with an incurable illness, in other words, euthanasia, is actually one of the items on the Machiavellian scale. But it can lead to some remarkable mental gymnastics to insist that it's not inconsistent, and I am sure that everybody in this room is already having examples springing to mind. Now, I'm going to talk about how this fits with strategy in dealing with public education and dialogue. And I'm going to use abortion and then apply it to others. But the abortion is the clearest case because we had a clear-cut 1973 Roe v. Wade. So the first cognitive cognition, that's the, you know, the thought, the belief, the thing that is got to be in agreement, is that we Americans are noble and virtuous people. Okay? That's a thought that people have in their minds, they like it. Cognition 2, abortion numbers are rising. This is the situation in the 1970s. So, in the famous words of Ray Perry, oops. It's a huge problem because we can't give up on condition 1. Our self-esteem is involved. Now, a lot of pro-lifers did give up on it. What a bunch of sinful people we are. And they would go out and educate people about abortion to try to convince them, what a sinful people we are. Didn't work real well for lots of folks. There's a reason for that, and I don't think you need me to throw a whole bunch of psychological studies at you to understand why once I worded it the way I did. But you can't give up on cognition 2 because it's a fact. You can ignore it, you can just not pay attention, but you can't just decide it isn't so. It's a fact. Facts are harder to change than opinions, as long as they remain facts. So, what Americans were doing is saying, to make these 2 points consistent, abortion must not be so bad. And all these people who were trying to explain, and we've talked constantly about the hostility that's aimed at us, but it's a very simple point. We're not simply trying to convince them that abortion is wrong, we're also trying to convince them that we're a bunch of jerks for ever having allowed it. And that is the hump that has been difficult, one of the major humps that's been difficult to get over. Now, to the rescue. This is a chart that comes from the Alan MacNair Institute, which many of you will know is the research arm of Planned Parenthood. You see in the 70s, zips up. Plateaus in the 80s. It is going steadily down.
But the number of abortions?
The number, this is the annual number, but the rate and the ratio are also going down. The rate per 100,000 women was going down, was following the same pattern, and the ratio of abortions to live birth was following the same pattern. So it wasn't simply a matter of, you know, this following the pattern of how many women of childbearing age there were, or any quirk like that.
What are those 2 blips in, where is that, 1980, where it goes up, those 2 rather little mountains? Yeah, little mountains.
Oh, it's essentially a plateau.
So nobody's done any research as to what was happening economically or politically?
Oh, yes. There is huge amounts of research, but most of the research is comparing state by state. Because states have different situations, and that's the best way. So you can compare the states that had informed consent to those that didn't, and the states that had parental consent to those that didn't, and the states that had Medicaid funding to those that didn't. There's been huge amounts of studies on those, and you know, definitely I would encourage you to look into that, but that is going beyond the point here. Why are the numbers going down? There's several reasons. One is that the repeat abortions are increasing. Okay, no wait. I'm sorry. My next slide is on why it's going down. This slide is saying there's a bigger downturn on the way because the repeat abortions are increasing. So what's happening is you've got this thing going up, and because that's the repeat abortions. But you've got the total number going down. Okay? Now that means, I mean, and it makes a certain amount of sense. In order to have a repeat abortion, you have to have had a previous abortion. So if you are a woman who is going to have a repeat abortion, you can't be put into, you can't be statistically counted until you get around to doing it, which takes time. But because the repeat abortions are increasing, that means that the first-time abortions have gone down at a far more dramatic rate than the numbers show, because the repeat abortions are keeping them up. But since you do have to have that first one before you can have the second one, that means the pool for repeat abortions is drying up. And that means that we are looking for a more dramatic drop in the coming years because, I mean, the women with the repeat abortions will be hitting menopause and, getting sterilizations and whatnot. Over time, attrition will cause that. Now, why the decline? At their peak, there were 2,000 freestanding abortion clinics nationwide and a whole bunch of hospitals where you could also get abortions. Now the number hovers around 700 freestanding abortion clinics nationwide, and there are way, way, way fewer hospitals that will do them. And a lot of the demand is supply driven. That is to say, you have 10 clinics in your town. Your friend says, oh, that one's handy. You go in and there's a counselor whose income depends on talking you into it. Mm-hmm. All of those things are absent. You look in the yellow pages and you see abortion alternatives takes up half the page, and then there are 2 abortion providers listed. All of a sudden, it doesn't look nearly as much like the norm. And I'm referring to what I saw just last week in the Kansas City Yellow Pages. The stigma remains. They never were able to get rid of that. The services to pregnant women expand. And the 1990 Supreme Court allowed laws like informed consent and parental involvement, and the studies have shown, comparing by states, those are effective. In fact, there's a recent study suggesting they're effective in helping lower the teen suicide rate, too, the parental involvement ones. But that's more than we can get into now. There's a little sister effect on abortion aftermath. That is to say, just like the little brother effect of people, of the guys who were seeing their big brothers washed out on crack, that's where that concept comes from. That women are seeing that abortion, they're seeing all their friends and whatnot who had abortions and seeing that it didn't have the helpful effect that it was supposed to have, that it did have traumatizing after effects, and they're like, I'm not doing that. And then pro-life education, especially ultrasound, and especially the fact that a lot of young women nowadays who are to getting the pregnancy age have ultrasounds of themselves as fetuses stuck on the refrigerator door. Mm-hmm. So this is what we call, what I call the great switch. Now remember from the 1970s, we were butting against having to tell people that they were a bunch of rotten jerks for allowing this. Now, Cognition 1 still has, the Americans are a noble and virtuous people. Cognition 2, the abortion numbers, rate, and ratio are all going down. Well, of course. They not only match beautifully, but Cognition 2 now bolsters the case for Cognition 1. The late Governor Casey was brilliant at this. He would talk in his speeches about how, well, there's just no way that the abortion industry can keep going in a country like America. I mean, it happened once, but there's just it wouldn't be able to last. There wouldn't, not in a country like ours. And I thought that rhetorically that was perfect.
Yeah.
Now, a major part of the theory of cognitive dissonance is that if people know that their behavior is changing, they will look for reasons to account for the change. And the more reasons, the better. Okay? So, because the more reasons, then the more consistent it is that there was a change. Well, we didn't know that it was going to cause breast cancer. We thought we were helping women, and experience shows otherwise. So in other words, they're not saying, I was a real jerk all along, I never should have done this. That they are saying, oh, well, now that we have new reasons, this accounts for why it's changing. And a perfect case of this was on ABC News. One time, I've got the citation in the book, the Achieving Peace in the Abortion War book. They talked about how the average age of the abortion doctor was around 65. I mean, the field is graying. And they talked about these numbers going down. And then they immediately did a report on Rachel's Vineyard. This is ABC National News. And then they did a thing saying, well, you know, the ultrasounds are getting so much better, we can see the pregnancy so much better. Yeah, well, we all know the pictures were plenty good enough before. I mean, we have the Life magazine and the Miracle of Life and all that. The pictures have been plenty good enough for plenty long enough. Let them have it. Let them have it. The pictures have gotten better. That accounts for our change. We do not need to get them straightened out. History will know. When our descendants are looking at us 100 years from now, they're going to wonder what kind of idiots we were. They can do that because we'll be their ancestors. We do the same with our ancestors in slavery. So it won't be any kind of I mean, that's our goal, is to make this, people have the attitude towards abortion that they now have to slavery. So when we are educating about abortion, this is psychologically very important. We need to inform people how the numbers ratio are going down, and it's ideal if you can get that in at the beginning. I have seen times, I mean, I had one time when I said this straight to a reporter, and all of a sudden, boom, we were going to the reasons why this would be. It makes, the thing is, people are going to be defensive about what you say, and what you've done is you've just pulled down the need for a defense. The need for a defense is gone if you explain. So we say how they're going down, we explain why this is likely to continue, cast the arguments against abortion as the reasons for the decline, and then cast them to explain why listeners oppose abortion now when they didn't before. We've got more information than we had before. Okay.
Hey Rachel, can I ask a quick question?
Yeah?
Why are you so optimistic that society will have an attitude toward abortion that we now have towards slavery, like in 100 years or something?
Because that's how psychology works. If I may continue.
With war too?
Absolutely. That's what I'm getting to. If you apply this also to death penalty, euthanasia, and infanticide, in those cases, if you know your history, you know that those things are shadows of what they used to be. I mean, they used to hang people for pickpocketing and find that it got to be a problem because the crowds that gathered to watch it were having their pockets picked. I mean, that's how much of a deterrence it was. Infanticide, I mean, you know, in Roman times, the Christians were going and picking them up off the hillsides. Because exposure of infants was just really common. It was common throughout the Middle Ages. It has been, nowadays, you hear about a case of it, and it's a scandal.
Except for in China.
What?
Except for in China.
Well, and this is the thing. All of these things are in different parts of the world. There's more euthanasia in some parts than others, more infanticide, more death penalty. Death penalty, of course, is in China and Saudi Arabia. But see, even in the United States, most a lot of states don't have it. The chance of actually getting abolition is, if you were saying, well, my goal is the abolition of the death penalty, people might argue with you because they think it's not desirable. But they're not nearly as likely to tell you that you're pie in the sky, get real. Because it has been abolished in European Union, it has been abolished in a large number of places.
In North Carolina, we have several hundred people on death row. We haven't had an execution in 5 or 6 years because of a number of different factors have ground it to a halt. Now, we still fear that it might start again.
And we need to be working on it. But 100 years ago, they would all be gone now. They would all have been executed by now, 100 years ago. And now, when I put this information up in the Thanksgiving edition, some of you will remember of Peace and Life Connections. Oh, and by the way, if anybody here doesn't have a subscription to Peace and Life Connections, get me afterwards and it's our weekly one-page free e-newsletter. But I did a Thanksgiving issue, and I got somebody that was arguing back with me. Well, you just can't say this. I mean, it's so terrible. And I said, well, you know, the numbers are down. He wrote back, but look at the case of Troy Davis. And I thought, yes, the case of Troy Davis was intolerable, outrageous, and we've actually gotten to the point where we can get this upset about one case.
Right.
One person.
Yeah.
We can get this upset about one case. That is progress. Now, the guy that was arguing with me seemed to be under the impression that if I say we've made progress, it's not as bad as it used to be, that somehow I'm indicating that it's just not so bad. Well, one case is so bad. But you can't get to 0 until you get down to 1, and you can't get down to 1 until, I mean, if you're starting off with 1,000, it's progress to make it to only 100. And this is the important part. First, there's 2 very important reasons why we need to be mindful of this. One is that it is simply more persuasive. If people know that the death penalty is actually, the actual situation of the death penalty, the idea of abolishing it is not nearly as, what kind of starry-eyed idealist are you, as it would have been 100 years ago.
There's a good example of that. UNICEF has had this campaign against child mortality called Down to Zero.
Yeah.
You know, that, I mean, when I saw that, I was like, we can do this now? It's that close?
Exactly. And so the second point is it's not just persuasion. It's keeping us active. Because if we are dealing with something that is so formidable, a juggernaut that we can't ever do, then why not just go home and, you know, at least have a pleasant life for yourself? Can't get anything done anyway. What we need is to be clear that we are, in fact, that close. That that all of the work that was done by previous generations has borne fruit, and therefore, if we keep doing the work, what we're doing is going to bear fruit too. And then we'll finally look at war.
Well,
Sorry.
That's another thing that can go down.
You'll see, if you actually look at the rate of people dying in war throughout history,
This takes into account the increase in human population.
this is a rate.
Okay.
Per 100,000 people.
Right.
Yeah.
Per 100,000 people. And of course, you can see in the 40s, I mean, the 40s were well known for being especially high on this. If you look at the rate of war and just plain homicide throughout history, the 20th century was actually better than the Middle Ages, which in turn was better than ancient times.
Who did these statistics?
I,
G Suite.
Homicide and War Going Down. The book is called The Better Angels of Our Nature by Steven Pinker. And he doesn't cover infanticide or euthanasia, and he's of the kind of mindset that the thought wouldn't occur to him. In fact, he is so thorough of an atheist, I've talked to him personally, that I just found it so ironic that the name of his book is The Better Angels of Our Nature.
Does this include the bombing of civilians? Is
Yeah.
that considered battle?
See, my understanding,
Yep.
I've heard several times statistics saying that the civilian rate
Yeah.
has been consistently increasing as
That's right.
opposed, so I don't get
Under
this.
control, right?
This is all deaths, civilians and non-civilians included. But if you're talking about the rate of all people killed and then the portion of them that are civilians, that's a different figure from this. This is all people killed, period.
So the civilian rate may be rising while the combatant rate is going down.
But the overall rates are
So
still
the
going up.
overall rate is going
Yeah,
down.
people in general are going down, but the numbers of deaths in which those happen to civilians is going up. I think that's,
Right.
It's the ratio, the ratio.
Portion,
ratio,
it's the
yeah.
ratio.
And the number of civilians who died who are children is incredibly high.
Right.
Yes.
But the weapons.
Well, and the thing is, I mean, if those of us who remember the Vietnam War, there was a body count
Right.
given that was higher for Americans only. They didn't bother with the Vietnamese, which of course was much higher. There was a body count given on the news, and they simply gave the numbers.
Wow. Wow.
And in the war in Iraq, they're giving us pictures of the people as they
And it took a long time to get that going. It was a huge campaign to get the news to put the names and the ages.
But the
of
point is that the numbers are
there's
low
numbers
enough that
that
you
they
even
can do
could
it.
do that.
Mm-hmm.
The numbers are low enough that you can give each individual a picture and a few
Right.
seconds of airtime. That would have been impossible during the Vietnam War.
Over the course of Vietnam, whether you look at it as a 10-year, a 12-year, or
Right.
15-year war, depending on what
58,000.
bracket you want, you're talking about in the vicinity of 60,000 dead U.S. military people.
Yeah.
Now, we've been doing Iraq for about the same length of time. And dead is, it's several thousand, which is hugely less military casualties. And that's a difference. It's a difference in the nature of war, and it's a difference in who war is killing.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, and some of it is
Medical.
simply technology. People who used to die from a wound now get rushed to hospital and they don't die from that same wound.
So the number of people we have
And
with
also
severe
the-
disabilities is going way up.
Oh, yeah.
Because we're
And so
using
that is
drones
still
so that, so our soldiers are not dying as much.
And
as-
that happens as well. And the thing is that war and abortion are both things that are so prominent in our society right now that it is seriously worth spending huge amounts of time working against them.
Right.
And then there are people that will work on the death penalty even though the numbers are lower, but the principle of it is important.
Where are the passions?
And euthanasia, fortunately, is not nearly as much of a, I mean, the slippery slope that we were fearing and still have reason to fear and should still watch out for, didn't tumble down. But the point is that while you're busy explaining everything that's wrong, you also better be saying, you know what, the peace movement and the pro-life movement and all the movements that are against violence, including movements against racism and movements to get access for folks with disabilities and all of the various movements, the women's movement, all of the movements that are against violence, when they are being successful, it is to our advantage both for persuading people and for keeping our folks active, when it's true, to highlight it and point it out.
To give the people a future. We are the people of the future.
We are the people of the future. The human race is maturing.
We are the people we've been waiting for.
Yeah.
Okay, Sharon.
What effect do you think the tanking economy that, this mild depression that we're having seems to have? I know we may have more crisis pregnancy centers, but crisis pregnancy centers depend a lot upon government aid, both for themselves and for their clients. And this has been declining. Or because of a poor economy, more young people are going to the Army. Now, if you have a large Army, you may want to use it. What effect do you think our tanking economy has on changing
Well,
this?
you just outlined the problems very nicely. But I think it's also true that the reason the economy is tanking, there are two big reasons. One is that we had a setup that was unsustainable and it's in the process of not sustaining. And the other is that we have huge greedy corporations who are screwing us around. And this has been true for some time and will be true for some time. So it is part of what we have to, it's part of the connections that we have to deal with. And it's part of the process that we do have to deal with. We have to include that in our calculations. And I would not be surprised if that downward trend plateaued again because of the economy. But I don't have the figures in yet.
But actually, I mean, crisis pregnancies themselves, except in 2 or 3 states, don't get any government funding that your the clients do, and that's what they refer to government programs. But the crisis pregnancy centers, they haven't been closed because the number is still increasing. People that can commit to them have decided that's a priority. Maybe that thing's more difficult for them. They've got to help these women, and they've made it a priority. And most of the aid to them is private, not governmental. I mean, the clients, you do refer to government programs, and all those centers do. But I don't think that's, it has more effect on that there are more women who are desperate, in desperate circumstances, and it's desperation that causes thinking about abortion. But in terms of the response is not really shown that kind of effect.
Well, remember that there are tricky things too, like the parental consent means not only that abortions go down in that age group, but pregnancies go down in that age group.
Yeah, there's studies on that. Yeah.
So I mean, we're not just talking about women getting pregnant as if we thought pregnancy the same way we catch colds.
Well, I really think Sharon's point about private centers relying on government clients, referring them to government, that's a very well taken point, because there is a tremendous movement in this country to dismantle what little social safety net we have, compared to the resources that we could put into it. There are organized efforts to slash Medicaid, Social Security, disability,
Head Start.
yes, Head Start, WIC, all of those things. And I think if that happens, even, I know not everyone agrees with me, but I would put the Title X family planning program in the category of programs that are threatened. And I think that if these programs are slashed like that, we will see a rise in the abortion rate.
And what you said about it's economics.
It's the money, though.
The economics play such a huge part in women choosing abortion or making. I feel it's really not a choice. It's women being backed into abortion, and so it really calls for a restructuring of society so that women, especially women and girls in crisis pregnancies, have all the services and support and acceptance that they need to be able to deal with it. Not saying that it's a good thing, but recognizing that if we don't address it that way, we are not going to get rid of abortion.
Well, and this is the thing. We know about connections. So we know that poverty is or material deprivation is one of the cruel things that are pushing women into abortions, and therefore we do need to address, as we're saying, the government services that pregnant women need, including the prenatal health care and the whole bit. And this is also an important point, just I think for consistent life, is, you know, a lot of people view the goal as making abortion illegal. I view the goal as making abortion unthinkable. And the legal status is one aspect, but it is only one aspect, and if we just went to status quo ante and had a pre-Roe v. Wade situation, that is not satisfactory. And I don't think any pro-lifer who thinks about it 2 seconds would think that it was. So we are having to be aware that the connections are extremely important, and I think that's one of the reasons that that consistent life is a major contribution to the pro-life movement, in addition to being a major contribution to the peace movement.
You said that any pro-lifer who thinks about it for 2 minutes wouldn't want to go back to that, but unfortunately I've had way too many discussions with, I'll label them as conservative pro-lifers, who are also very anti-woman, really misogynist, and do want it to go back to that, and do want to hold women in an oppressive, I mean, they don't want society to change so that women have these support services and stuff. They do want it to be a burden, and they do want it to keep women from making other choices in their lives. And
I think they are going to find that their ability to be persuasive is remarkably low.
It already is.
Paul?
I was going to ask you, because I don't know the answer to this, but maybe you do have some information. What do you understand to be the correlation between the abortion rate and the health of, conventionally understood health of the economy in the United States anyway? How do they correlate? Is it, does the economy get worse and that pushes
Well, I can tell you,
incidence of abortion? And
I can tell you about the relationship of economy to lynchings, which is, there isn't one.
That's a little bit of a different
No. It's a little bit of a difference, but there is a point where there was a theory that lynchings go up because people are frustrated.
Mm-hmm.
But in fact, with the Great Depression, lynchings did not go up.
Mm-hmm.
The upsurge of abortions was in the 70s, the plateau in the 80s. I think there has been studies that indicate that abortion rates are lower with the support for pregnant women, particularly in places like Europe and other countries.
Okay.
But also, state by state, there has been studies that the support for pregnant women directly does have that. I'm unaware of studies that have to do with, you know, correlation with the unemployment rate, for instance.
Right. My intuition is, you know, I'm a little bit hostile to Adam Smith's invisible hand personally, and that Adam has a tendency to strangle and throttle a lot of life possibilities in the name of
Adam
profiteering.
Smith was positively against large corporations.
Yes.
But I know. So
His invisible hand was
so
like
is Teddy Roosevelt,
family
like I'm a
farmers.
Republican and a progressive.
Well, Mary?
A couple of points. One is I often think about the prohibition of alcohol and how well that worked. When I think about prohibiting abortion, and it's not to say that I would necessarily be sad if abortion was more prohibitive now, but just that I'm not sure that it's the strategy that's really going to work to really make abortion end. That's a
Yeah, I'm going to comment on that.
2-week-long topic.
I have a quick comment. Go
Okay,
ahead.
comment, and then I'll make my second point.
Okay, I would say that in fact, those for whom making it illegal is a goal have it backwards if they think that making it illegal is going to stop it.
Right.
Stopping it is going to make it illegal. And a prime example of that is at Truman Medical Center, which is the hospital for the poor folk in Kansas City. They were going to do abortions, and the pro-lifers were going to say, well, you know, have the state say, no, you can't do it, we'll cut your funds if you do it. And they said, oh, you'll cut our funds? Those funds go to the poor. And so the press, of course, took the side of the hospital, saying, well, that's terrible. Don't these pro-lifers care about the poor? And the pro-lifers were like, yes, we do care about the poor. The idea was that you would just stop doing abortions if the funds were cut. And but obviously that didn't work, so the pro-lifers withdrew and went and did other campaigns instead. The head of the OBGYN department that was next selected turned out to be, apparently unbeknownst to them, a member of Missouri Citizens for Life. And he made it clear to all the interns and residents and whatnot that they were not going to get any brownie points with him by volunteering for the abortion rotation. And since there's kind of a trepidation towards doing that anyway, that was good enough to. And then came the Webster decision that was involving this. Basically, at the beginning of the process, if you called Truman and said, I want an abortion, they'd say, fine, come in Tuesday at 2. At the end of the process, you said, I want an abortion. They said, fine, you find a doctor that's willing to do it for you, and he can do it here.
Yeah, big difference.
By the time we actually got a law passed so that abortions were not done at Truman Medical Center as a public hospital, the number that had been done the previous year there was 3. Okay? So that's what I'm saying. It's when you got it down so low that getting to 0 is not that big of a deal. That's when you're going to get to 0. I'd also like to say, as far as prohibition is concerned, that I like to point out that what we have here is actually prohibition in reverse. That is to say, we let loose of abortion, thinking that it was going to, lower child maltreatment and child abuse and all these things that it was going to do. And in fact, it has had the opposite effect, and it has not worked out well.
Women's prerogative.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. You had to say.
I wanted Patrick to speak for a minute to this campaign that he just did with Peace Action and some other groups in North Carolina about Bring Our War Dollars Home, because I think it's really important for us to make those connections between how we can't have social programs if we put all our money into war. If you just say a couple sentences.
Well, just go online to costofwar.org and plug in your zip code or the name of your town, and it'll tell you, it has a running ticker tape of how much war is costing your little town or village. And I don't know if it has the whole nation in there or not, but I was able to find a lot of most major cities in Raleigh and North Carolina. And then what you want to do is deal with the fact that most people don't really know the real cost of war. People just know it costs a lot, but they don't realize how much it siphons off their community. So then when you know, for instance, Raleigh just went over the $1 billion mark in Iraq. So just from that one city, $1 billion had already been used in the war. So then you take that billion and you show what can happen with human service. Or better than that, show what's being cut. And it comes out to way less than the cost. And then you can just keep showing that connection. So that's really and this is going on all over the country. The cost of war, Bring Our War Dollars Home, is not unique to North Carolina. Bruce Gagnon started it up in Maine, and it's getting a lot of play. But the idea is that in a bad economy, people are more interested in knowing where the money's going. So we established a campaign at the beginning of the campaign, and there's not a shortage of money right now. It's just that we're using the money for the wrong thing. There's enough money to pay for education and social programs. And you can expand that. You can talk about prisons, the prison industrial complex. You can bring some other local issues that concern you into that. But And you can also probably look up online, Bring Our War Dolls Home campaign. But we were very successful in our campaign. We have this guy, Walter Jones in North Carolina. You guys might have heard of him. He's an anti-war Republican. And he's an interesting guy. You'll be seeing a story of mine about him in NCR. He converted from Baptist to Catholic and from Democrat to Republican. His father was my congressman in the late 70s. But he was the one who was so angry at France for refusing to join the war effort that he had the fries renamed Freedom Fries in the Capitol Restaurant, the cafeteria. And when he became aware of the fact that the Bush administration and Rumsfeld and the rest of the crowd lied to him, he says that right up, I was lied to by the previous administration. He's a Republican. And but here's this bizarre juxtaposition. We're in this meeting 2 weeks ago with a bunch of white-headed pacifists like me, or close to pacifists, and Walter Jones is there with 2 Democratic congressmen, and he gives his anti-war spiel and gets a standing ovation from this total left-wing crowd, which is bizarre, and considering what the political
Nick doesn't
climate.
think so.
I bet he's not been to one of those things. The point is that considering that we've probably got the worst stalemate in the Congress right now that we've ever had in terms of just everybody's intransigent, but here was this guy Jones walking into this room full of progressives and getting a standing ovation. And keep in mind, the last time I heard Walter Jones speak before this was at the Raleigh March for Life, where unfortunately he took it like from abortion right into anti-gay marriage stuff, which was frustrating. But I mean, he's a bona fide right-winger on a lot of issues, and I mean, but anyway, you don't have Walter Jones in your state. We have him in North Carolina. But there are a lot of other people out there who have been burned by the war in one way or another.
Well, there's like a dozen Republicans in the House.
Right.
Yeah.
You can also bring. We had a guy who was in the divinity school at Duke University. He's intellectual, and then that guy Matthew Ho, who resigned from the Obama administration over the Afghan policy. He was at the press conference too. We spent some money to bring some people in. But you can find people who were supportive of war who have now switched, and to tell their stories. And we know from the pro-life effort that when you have those people telling their stories, be it an abortion doctor or someone who's had an abortion and been coerced or led to believe the lies, that's your most powerful ally.